I want to be clear at the outset, against the backdrop of these dangerous times, the idea that we must choose between our allies, I reject it utterly. Attlee did not choose between allies. Churchill did not choose. The national interest demands that we work with both. It's written not in some dry, dusty treaty, but in the ink of shared sacrifice.
Choose between America or Europe. That's plain wrong. These words from Keir Starmer have set the political world on fire. But it's what he said next that's really got people talking. In a move that's been called everything from brave to foolish, Starmer has drawn a line in the sand. But as tensions rise and alliances shift, one question remains. Is this the beginning of the end for Britain's special relationship with America? Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favour. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Many were surprised by Keir Starmer's sudden shift from cautious critic to worldwide challenger. He had been portrayed for a long time as the very model of cautious British politics.
Voting Keir Starmer, the UK Premier.
Yes, he's coming tonight.
What do you think of him? Some of his colleagues in government are quite critical of you.
Well, I'm going to see him in about an hour, so I have to be nice, right? Understand? He's done a poor job. Crime is up, a lot of problems. And I don't think he should be criticizing a representative of the United States that can do so much good for the United Kingdom. We talked about it before. But I actually think he's very nice. I think he ran a great race. He did very well. It's very early, but he's popular, and I'll be seeing him, and I'll send you regards.
His backers lauded his calm approach, but his detractors said he lacked the ferocity to challenge the Tories. Political analysts, however, are perplexed as to what changed and why. It seems that Donald Trump's strong foreign policies were the tipping point for Starmer. Starmer saw a chance to underline Britain's independence as Trump increased pressure on friends to choose between the US and the EU. It's a bold step, but it has unexpectedly gained the backing of people from all walks of life. Starmer has gained the support of even his most vocal detractors. Even though he and Starmer have their differences, former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn hailed the decision as a necessary stand for British sovereignty. Republican lawmaker Rory Stewart hailed it as a rare moment of true leadership in these uncertain times. But what did Starmer tell Trump in particular? Starmer was forthright in a speech that has since gone viral across the Atlantic, declaring, "Mr. Trump, Britain is not for sale." He said, "We shall not be coerced into picking sides between our American friends and our European neighbours. British interests, not Washington's ultimatums, will guide our foreign policy." Reactions from Britons have been varied, but generally good. Many Britons are surprised by Starmer's newfound courage, but a YouGov poll shows that 62% of them support his position. Memes and hashtags honouring Starmer's spine have taken over social media. The first reaction from Trump has been unusually subdued. His previous tweets referred to Starmer as a failed politician, but he has refrained from identifying the Labour leader in his most recent ones.
The Foreign Secretary and I did meet President-elect Trump just a few weeks ago for dinner for about a couple of hours, and we discussed a number of issues of global significance. It was a very constructive exercise, giving a masterclass on student politics. But seriously, Mr. Speaker, we live in probably a more volatile world than we've lived in for many decades.
Given that most of his cabinet signed a motion to ban President Trump from addressing Parliament, will the Prime Minister show that he and his government can be more than student politicians by asking you, Mr. Speaker?
People are starting to think that Trump is really worried about alienating a crucial friend because of his relative quiet on the matter. Starmer has a lot on the line. He jeopardizes the friendship between the United Kingdom and its most powerful partner by taking on Trump. Potentially at stake are trade agreements, intelligence sharing, and military cooperation. However, Starmer appears to be placing his bets on the idea that opposing Trump will ultimately benefit Britain's global reputation and his personal political career. The news focused on Starmer because of her opposition to Trump, but that's just the beginning. A considerably more perilous political terrain lies beneath the surface. A single misstep might spell disaster for Britain as it becomes entangled in a high-stakes international chess game. Can Starmer successfully navigate the US and EU without jeopardizing UK interests? The the diplomatic community is in a state of disarray as a result of Trump's ultimatum to international leaders. Countries like Britain are now in an impossible situation due to his claim that there is no middle ground, no wiggle room between the US and Europe. It's not enough to simply pick a side. You must also negotiate a complex web of alliances and interests. Especially pressing for the British government is this problem. Following Brexit, the UK is making an intense effort to carve out its own niche in the international arena. Although it has a unique connection with the United States, how can it keep its European neighbours from becoming envious? Starmer is being very courageous and quite reckless by not giving in to Trump's demands. Further complicating things is the Brexit factor. There was hope that Britain's exit from the EU would mark the beginning of a more autonomous and influential age for the country. It has, on the contrary, made the nation more susceptible to threats from across the Atlantic. Although Starmer's position may gain support domestically, it has the potential to undermine vital trade agreements that the UK requires for its success in the global market. British resistance to superpowers has a long and storied history. In a deft touch, Starmer brought it up in his speech, reassuring the audience that the British government has never had to choose between friends. Still, how similar is this to those earlier acts of rebellion? Or is Starmer being too dramatic? Higher economic stakes have never been seen. If Britain were to become too reliant on the United States, it may damage relations with the European Union and jeopardize trade agreements that are critical to the country's economy after Brexit. However, Washington could retaliate if you ignore Trump, which could impact information sharing and military collaboration, among other areas. When discussing military affairs, it is impossible to ignore NATO's part in this political chess game. Britain has chosen to back military aid, which places it in direct confrontation with Russia due to the ongoing crisis in Ukraine. Attempts by Starmer to strike a balance between US and EU interests are further complicated by this. The world's response to Britain's position is complex. The fact that Starmer has shown no allegiance is seen by certain countries as a brave and independent move. Some see it as a sign of uncertainty that would reduce Britain's global power. Britain's standing could rise or fall depending on this risky investment. Starmer appears to be attempting to avoid the two-sided US-EU debate by pursuing a third-way approach. Depending on how it turns out, it might be a very profitable or disastrous move. The Labour leader is putting his faith on the idea that he can steer the country safely through these perilous times by firmly stating Britain's independence. However, Starmer may encounter extremely turbulent waters due to the Trump administration's reputation for its intolerance of perceived neutrality. The UK is confronted with a range of possible scenarios as Starmer's daring proclamation takes hold. The ideal situation would be for Britain to become a well-respected mediator between world powers, using its advantageous position to encourage international collaboration. The worst-case scenario, however, depicts a bleak picture. The United Kingdom cut off from the rest of the world and economically devastated as a result of conflicts between European and American interests. The scenario at hand prompts a more general inquiry into the function of intermediate powers in the current geopolitical context. Is it possible for nations like Britain to actually forge its own path when they are trapped between two superpowers? There is no simple solution. The UK may have limited options due to economic and military dependencies, despite Starmer's refusal to back down, which demonstrates a desire to assert British interests. Whatever happens with Starmer's move, it will mark a turning point in international politics. In doing so, it questions the idea that weaker states should passively accept the will of stronger ones. The result may be a shift in global allegiances and the balance of power as other nations reconsider their stances in response.